Afternoon. Russian forces have been bombing targets on the outskirts of the Chechen capital Grozny. It follows an overnight attack on a village to the northeast of the city. In a separate incident, there are reports that 9 Chechen refugees were killed when Russian troops opened fire on 3 cars at an army checkpoint in Nestorovskaya. Meanwhile, Russia's President Yeltsin has asked the leader of the breakaway republic to meet his officials for talks. In Moscow is our correspondent Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, what more can you tell us first about that attack on the refugees?
Well, what we've heard is that the dead were in vehicles that were part of a 10-car convoy. Apparently the first 7 were allowed through, then Russian soldiers stopped the 8th, shot the driver dead, then according to reports shot the other people while they tried to escape, while they tried to drive their vehicles out of the firing line.
Now, what further details do we have about the possibility of further peace talks?
Well, President Yeltsin has said that the leader of the Chechens, General Dadayev, must meet his representative today and sign what's described as an appropriate ceasefire document if he wants to show that he is serious about peace. Otherwise, the threats of violence from the Russian troops around there still stand.
Jeremy, thanks very much. Earlier, our correspondent Angus Roxburgh sent us this report from Khasavyurt on the Chechen border with Dagestan.
Chechen fighters armed with petrol bombs and bayonets were still preparing to fend off a Russian advance as Moscow's latest deadline expired at midnight. Russia warned it would launch bomb and missile strikes on the capital Grozny if they did not disarm. From the hills here, about 50 kilometres east of Grozny, I could hear the sound of loud explosions just 50 minutes after the midnight deadline. But the attacks appear to have been aimed at targets outside the city. Sources in the Chechen president's palace say they've received assurances from the Russian defence minister that specific targets would be attacked only with his personal approval. But Russian forces remain dug in just a few kilometres from the capital, and there's no indication that Moscow intends to give way. It's only a question of how carefully or humanely it decides to bring the Chechens to heel. Angus Roxburgh, BBC News, Chechnya.
Here, the Labour leader Tony Blair has again refused to rule out the possibility of a referendum on closer ties with Europe. He said the people should be consulted on any major constitutional change, but he accused the government of moving towards a referendum simply to appease conservative Eurosceptics.
Tony Blair couldn't have been firmer in saying Labour would be at the heart of Europe. But while he didn't steal a march on the Conservatives by actually promising now to consult the British people, he said a step like a single currency would have to go to a referendum or a general election.
The important thing is to recognise that we've got to move, if we're moving towards further European integration, with popular consent. In other words, the days of this being decided by political elites is over.
The Conservatives, still reeling from their disaster in the Dudley by-election, remain divided over whether to offer the Tory Eurosceptics the olive branch of a referendum. One pro-European cabinet minister thinks such an offer shouldn't be made just to bring peace in the party.
Harold Wilson used a referendum to unite the then Labour Party in the 70s. It's the worst reason of all.
John Major could yet be forced to commit the Conservatives to a referendum. But writing for a Sunday newspaper, he says the party remains in credit after a year of achievement, despite their divisions.
MPs from all 3 major parties have criticised the decision of 2 Sunday newspapers to reveal the identity of the £18 million lottery winner. The News of the World and Yorkshire on Sunday said it was unrealistic to expect the winner's identity to remain a secret. Last week, the High Court lifted an injunction banning publication of the winner's name. That's it. We'll have more news at 6 o'clock, but now back to John Humphreys on the record.